Welcome to the Public Service Innovation Conference, the fourth of its kind in beautiful Cork City Hall. My name is Áine Kerr. I'm an entrepreneur and broadcaster, and it's my real pleasure to be your host this morning for a day that we're going to talk a lot about innovation and transformation across the public sector. Now, I'm conscious on days like today, we can bandy words around like innovation and agility and resilience and change transformation. And sometimes those words can lose a little bit of their meaning. But I genuinely do hope between now and 3:30 that you're going to leave with a lot of tangible tools and insights and takeaways. So just practical tips, ideas, case studies, international examples that you can take back to your teams tomorrow, that you're going to leave also inspired into action, inspired by the stories that you're going to hear from so many incredible experts who are giving their time and also their honesty and their mistakes and their learnings on stage here today. But I also hope that you feel a real sense of connection amongst each other today after 2.5 years of probably looking at each other on little square boxes on Zooms, and that we don't take for granted the serendipity, the spontaneity, the sense of creativity that can come from putting great minds in a beautiful room like this for a day. Because when you are a leader at the top of your game, it can feel incredibly lonely, sometimes having to be the person who's building consensus and building collaboration, but having to place smart bets, constantly having to do the business as usual and the future proofing. And that puts a tall order on all of you. But I hope coming away from 3:30 today, if you're not leaving with practical tips or you haven't been inspired to action, but hopefully we're going to do both, if nothing else, that you do feel that sense of being amongst people who share similar problems, but similar challenges and opportunities to you, because you are amongst your tribe here for the rest of the day in terms of that spirit and that sense of higher purpose that I think all of you in the public service bring to your vocations, bring to your jobs, bring to your departments every day. And normally maybe back in the office now at 10:05, a lot of you might already be firefighting, playing a game of whack-a-mole. I'm familiar with it. You put out one fire over here and it prompts one in another part of the team and the department. And the challenge for you this morning is to try and set aside that game of whack-a-mole from now to 3:30 and step up onto a balcony mentally. So out of the weeds, the whack-a-mole, up onto a balcony that enables you to look out at your teams, look out at other departments and see where there are opportunities to transform, to change, to collaborate, to do more. And I want you to really, in all of the sessions today, think about this analogy. The difference between seeding a field and planting a crop. Because what we all have to do day in, day out with our departments and our teams is constantly just make sure we're harvesting the crops. It's important work, keeps the lights on, it keeps the country running, make sure that our citizens are thriving and that you're all fulfilling that public service remit that you all sign up to every day. But if you're not also seeding the fields, we're not future-proofing. We're not thinking about innovation. We're not thinking about change and transformation. Now, it's not a decision. It's not a binary choice between harvesting the crops and seeding the fields. It's a case of also and. Not this, then that, but also and. How do we do both? And that's the challenge in a lot of the sessions that we'll talk about today. Because when we are planting those seeds and planting those fields, we're playing big. And playing big for our teams and our departments and our citizens and our country does require us to think about 2030, 2040, 2050 and beyond. To imagine a world of new technologies, to imagine the consequences of climate change, to be proactive, to be preventative, to be innovative, to be creative. So what does it look like for you as a leader today when you are planting seeds, when you are planting those fields and not just harvesting the crops? With all of that, I really do hope in the themes that we'll cover today that we'll hear from you, the audience. It's going to be really important. Those of you on the live stream, those of you here in the audience, we want this very much coming from you with questions at the end of sessions. You can do that. There's going to be handheld mics in the room. For those of you online, we have Slido, and hopefully we'll pull it up here in a moment. But for those of you who need the code for Slido, and if you're in the room, you can use Slido too if you prefer not to use the handheld mics. And the code for Slido is 3504161. So 3504161 is your code for Slido, for those of you online, those of you in the room. We'd also love to bring attention to today's event, the 4th conference of its kind here in Cork. There is a hashtag. You'll find all the relevant departments, particularly the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. Find their handle, you'll find the hashtags, but it's NASH-INNOV, so INNOV Week IRL, just to bring attention across LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. to today. Just finally, I want you to think throughout all of the sessions today of just one thing that you might leave with. It might be a goal you're going to set yourself. It might be a new challenge, a new strategy, a new case study. One thing that you are going to bring back tomorrow. That you are asking yourself the question today, what would I do if I weren't afraid? What does innovation look like for me and my department if I weren't afraid? What does it look like to lead fearlessly? So just one thing between now and 3:30. Hold yourself accountable to that. And now to please welcome everybody and formally launch our 4th Public Service Innovation Conference, the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, Michael McGrath. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Áine, for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. You're all very welcome here to this historic venue, Cork City Hall, and I do want to thank the CEO of Cork City Council, Anne Doherty, for hosting us here this morning, and I know many of you have travelled to be with us here, and many others are joining us online. And whether they be at home or in their office, you're all very welcome to what is the 4th annual Public Service Innovation Conference. And it is brought to you by the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform with the full support of our partners in respect of this project, Microsoft Ireland. And I do want to pay tribute to Anne Sheehan and her team and to thank them for their continued support and collaboration in respect of this important event. And I am delighted to welcome so many distinguished public sector leaders in Ireland in terms of our public service and our civil service who are joining us today, whether it be in person or online. And I know that I echo on behalf of my Secretary General, David Moloney, a very warm welcome to all of you to this innovation conference today. And we gather to mark and acknowledge the ongoing and continuous changes taking place across the Irish public and the civil service. At present, we have over 370,000 public servants working across different sectors in Ireland. That's a number that has grown by tens of thousands in recent years, and it is set to continue to grow as we implement Budget 2023 and we target expansion across a range of different areas of public service in Ireland. And all of those public servants have been busy innovating, leading and participating in fresh new work practices that improve public administration practice for colleagues and for citizens alike. As National Public Service Innovation Week 2022 begins, I wish to pay tribute to our public and our civil servants for continuing to successfully innovate under the constraints posed by new and ongoing issues, both domestically and internationally. And of course, it is a time of great challenge, a time of heightened uncertainty, and over the last couple of years, the Irish Public Service has had to adapt and demonstrate incredible agility to respond to unfolding events. And you all have moved quickly to consistently deliver excellent services despite the uncertainty and the unpredictability of multiple challenges that we face at this time. And this week is a welcome opportunity for my department to celebrate the significant improvements that have taken shape throughout the public and the civil service in recent years. My department plays a key role in defining, in amplifying and in investing in systematic cross-sectoral public service transformation. We champion a professional and agile public sector that generate better outcomes for our society. We fund and connect public service bodies, and we actively research new ways of doing things, implementing actions to positively change public service workflow. This allows Deeper to play a pivotal role in the transformation journey, that of bridge builder between state organisations and members of the public. And it is the citizen that we must provide a dividend to as our key shareholder. And I think that is the prism really through which we look at everything that we are doing. And when we consider the question of innovation, it is how can we improve services to the people that we represent and the people that we serve. And that is ultimately the metric that I think we need to come back to when we're looking at any new idea or any new innovation. And a prerequisite for this dividend is making innovation a real and tangible exercise in the public service. This in turn has to be supported by the most responsive and reliable customer service possible. And it's important to have an innovation conference and an innovation week, but it's not something that we just switch on and off. The most important thing about innovation is it has to be part of our everyday working lives and part of our culture of work, so that every day we consider, is there a way of doing something better? Is there a way of doing new things? And how can we improve on the service that we provide to our country by way of public services? The government is committed to advancing a culture of innovation in our public service that provides a high-value return to communities into the future. Flexible and innovative improvements to service delivery, as successfully demonstrated by all during the COVID pandemic and more recently during our national response to assist those fleeing war in Ukraine, powerfully builds public trust and confidence in the state. And we are facing great challenges, not least in the area of accommodation provision, and the government will do everything we possibly can to make sure that all of those who come here seeking refuge, seeking shelter and seeking security are provided with the best services possible. And we know we have ongoing work to do to make sure that we achieve that. And I want to assure you that the government will do whatever it takes to make sure that we provide those vital supports to people who are coming here at a time of such trauma and upheaval in their own lives. And while public servants have achieved a lot in this time, there is work to be done by all of us to enable our organisations to become as exemplars of innovation, where permission to think differently, to be outspoken and to take a chance to experiment are embraced. And that is part of the culture that we want to make sure is evident across our public service. Where finding fresh ways of delivering services, using new ideas and methods are welcomed. This involves engaging with citizens to know their needs and designing solutions that reflect their perspective, using the right resources and multiple solutions. It involves anticipating change and fostering mutually beneficial partnerships in our quest to secure long-lasting transformation. Public service innovation plays a vital role in delivering better, more effective services for our customers and in supporting national economic and indeed social development. The government's Making Innovation Real strategy and the Civil Service Renewal 2030 strategy provide a practical roadmap for how we can build on our growing culture of innovation. The 4 key priority areas in Making Innovation Real provide guidance for public service organisations to anchor innovation in their corporate strategies and their business plans. They show how public service leaders can develop a workforce innovation culture that can flourish. Staff need the tools and the space to collaborate, to brainstorm, to share insights into how they can solve work-related problems in a different way. Similarly, the Civil Service Renewal 2030 strategy references the need to connect with external innovators, be it in industry, enterprise, research or academia to scale up and to spread solutions at pace, to achieve our ambition of delivering world-class policy and services here in Ireland. So I am very much looking forward to National Public Service Innovation Week 2022. This week's events, conferences and seminars are an important showcase for the government to demonstrate how our public service has taken risks, how it has digitised services and delivered swiftly in times of need. On Wednesday, we will launch our Public Service Innovation Fund for 2023, a strategic investment vehicle for public servants who have worked on many great projects that have brought benefits to our citizens. And on Friday, the Design in Government Conference will feature the launch of customer-centric principles aimed at embedding efficient design techniques in policy and services provided by government. So it is so great to see many people gathered here in person today after a really difficult couple of years to discuss how we can champion ongoing innovation and transformation in the public service. And I want to thank all of our guest speakers today. I want to pay particular thanks to all of my own team in the Public Service Transformation Delivery Unit in the department for organising National Public Service Week 2022 and again to acknowledge and thank Microsoft Ireland for their very significant contribution. My hope is that in the years to come we will look back and marvel at the significant advances our public services have made in providing outstanding value to members of the public. And I hope you all enjoy your time here in Cork, and I look forward to the remainder of the conference. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, Michael McGrath. And I think we already, you talk about looking back, feel a collective sense of pride at how the country has responded during COVID and given the war in Ukraine. Now, we also have a specially recorded message, so please give your attention to An Taoiseach Micheál Martin.
I welcome the opportunity to address you all today at the 4th Annual Innovation Conference and the beginning of Innovation Week. Innovation Week is an opportunity to bring together public and civil servants from different departments, authorities and non-commercial state agencies to discuss the value of innovation and how we might pursue it in our work. This event allows us to showcase examples of how and when our public service has thought outside the box and used novel ideas to solve problems. We know placing the needs and perspective of the citizen at the forefront of service provision is vital to an effective public service. Our Irish public service have demonstrated this, delivering successful innovation across different bodies and agencies. One example includes the upcoming launch of the Life Events portal. This portal is being developed to help citizens manage life events that require the involvement of public services. Its goal is to remove frustrations citizens may encounter during the course of already stressful and demanding life events, offering them an easier and more seamless interaction and a better experience with the public service. Over the course of COVID-19, the Health Protection Surveillance Centre developed a robotic automation process which helped navigate the National Infectious Disease Reporting System. And this allowed our public health teams to better focus on tracking the disease and managing outbreaks as they arose, exemplifying the benefit of combining a spirit of innovation with digital technology. As a government, we want to further enable these practices in the future, as demonstrated by the continued investment in Level 8 foundational certificates in artificial intelligence for public servants. Our Making Innovation Real policy strategy is a roadmap, helping us navigate how and why we can and should integrate innovation into our day-to-day thinking. To succeed, we need staff of all grades to strive for innovation as a central goal in their work. By promoting the voices, experiences and skills of our public and civil servants, we can create public bodies which act as leaders in this endeavour. To facilitate communication and the exchange of ideas, the Public Service Innovation Network was established and now has over 2,000 members and a total of 182 representatives from public sector bodies. The public and civil service are at the forefront of tackling some of the most difficult challenges in terms of both severity and complexity which confront our country today. These challenges include our commitment to tackling the climate crisis, the impact of the war in Ukraine and the cost of living. While we search for innovative ways to address these challenges, it is also important that we keep an eye on the opportunities that exist in working with the private sector. The benefits of such collaboration are evidenced by our partner, Microsoft, at today's conference. But partnerships between public services and industry stakeholders are many. They can and do provide a myriad of benefits, as demonstrated, for example, by the Future Tech Challenge, which saw the public service partner with Amazon Web Services, Cisco, and IBM. This week also marks the launch of the next iteration of the Public Service Innovation Fund for 2023. The fund, established in 2019, supports innovative ideas from public service bodies to promote collaboration and bring about new and better approaches to service delivery. Since its introduction, the fund has allocated 2.8 million to 87 projects across all sectors of public service. At today's conference, you will hear from expert panels on the delivery of impactful, citizen-centred services to the Irish public. You will also hear about emerging technologies and where we want to go next with innovation within the public service. Finally, you will learn about the climate emergency and the role of innovation in public service from a leadership perspective. Over the course of Innovation Week, there will be a series of presentations, workshops and panel discussions organised by the Public Service Transformation Unit at the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. I congratulate them on pulling this together, and I encourage as many of you as possible to attend as many of these events as possible. As the needs of our citizens and society continue to change, so too must our public service. The culture of resourcefulness and innovation that have got us to this point and brought us through the unique combination of challenges in the last few years will, I have no doubt, continue to evolve and embed itself. This culture, partnered with our use of emerging technologies and lessons learned in recent years, enables me to express my confidence in the future direction of our public service. Gurv míle maith go léir as bhór chud ibre agus go nairóig an tá libh.
And our thanks to An Taoiseach Micheál Martin for those opening remarks, and thank you to the Minister for staying with us. And we're also joined by Anne Sheehan, who is the General Manager for Microsoft. Minister, to maybe start where you ended there in terms of the national response of our collective civil service to COVID, to war in Ukraine, where people had to find a sixth, a seventh gear, like the level and the acceleration of innovation, creativity, collaboration. Do you think it's repeatable in normal times where we maybe aren't dealing with multiple emergencies?
Well, that's a great challenge, isn't it? And I think it is about embedding that culture of innovation, that we don't just innovate when we have to. And of course we had to over the last 2 years, and the public service and civil service were fantastic in what they delivered, and so many great examples in healthcare, but in non-healthcare areas as well, where we had to just change and pivot immediately in terms of how services were delivered. So sustaining that momentum is of course a challenge, but I think it is about just a culture. It's about encouraging people to continuously innovate, to try and do things differently, to be constantly seeking out opportunities to become more efficient. And that's why events like this, like the Innovation Week and indeed the Innovation Fund, are so important, that we incentivise, we reward, that we stimulate, we challenge each other to see if we can do things in a better and in a different way. It won't always be against the intense backdrop we had during COVID. We had no choice but to introduce new ways of doing things simply overnight. But I think it can be done, and I think we are seeing great examples of it, and there is real momentum there now. And we have a new public service pay deal now, which again carries forward the enabling architecture and the framework for those reforms to be embedded into the future, and I think that's so important.
For you, and the Minister mentioned the word momentum there a few times. And I think that's what we all struggle with now, is we've got this big momentum behind us. How do you build on it? Like, what are your learnings from the private sector that maybe are still relatable for the public sector?
I think, so good morning everybody. I think first of all, building what the Minister said, there was some incredible things achieved during COVID. And I think we all as leaders found muscles that we probably didn't have before. And I think we saw really great advancements in healthcare, citizen services, but also in how we worked. I mean, look at this conference this morning, we're doing it in a hybrid capacity. Some people here, some people dialing in. I think the biggest thing for me is around digital perseverance. And I think that word perseverance is really important. If we think what's going on in the world today, there's a war, we've got inflation, we've got an energy crisis. We have to persevere through it. We can't go backwards, and that's where the momentum comes in. We have to make sure that we continue to drive innovation and transformation. I think there's two key elements to that. The first, building, Minister, on what you said, is around culture. So leadership is so incredible. If we all reflect as leaders during COVID, I think we found an empowerment. We felt empowered, our organisations empowered us. I think some of the governance and the bureaucracy that often we get bogged down in both the public and private sector, we managed to kind of work through that. We created a sense of innovation and creativity, and we really saw that in the public sector. So let's not go back. Let's, as leaders, continue to drive that through. And then the second is the use of technology. So as the technology sector, our job is to continuously bring technology that's going to solve the world's challenges. But we need leadership and culture to drive and to push that through. So I think if there's any word I'd leave us all with this morning, it's just perseverance. Let's just persevere through, keep going on that momentum, and take our role as leaders here really, really seriously in how we create that environment of empowerment and creativity.
And Minister, building on that word perseverance, I think it's something everybody can relate to right now, having coming out of a once-in-a-century lifetime event, dealing with the impact of the war in Ukraine, a global cost of living crisis. You mentioned housing as a challenge. What would you say to everyone in the audience in terms of how maybe in this moment of ambiguity and what sometimes feels a little bit chaotic globally, given some of those external forces beyond our control, how do we need to think about doing things differently that are about perseverance? And do you think there's some areas, challenges that we should rise to meet this moment?
Well, just picking up on the theme of perseverance, I mean, it's so important to be resilient, and we are facing great challenges now, and global shocks seem to be happening far more frequently, and that may well be a pattern that's going to continue over the years ahead. So we've just got to be really versatile, and we've got to be resilient, and that necessity to be able to change quickly, I think is a feature that we're going to need into the future, because the world is changing, and the world isn't in a great place in many respects at the moment when you look at all of those great challenges that we face. But I think here in Ireland, we have developed a very strong reputation for delivery. We are good at getting things done. We are respectful to each other. We have a sense of community that I think is so important and has really stood to us over recent years. But when I look at what we've had to do even in the last number of months, like in framing the budget for 2023, we had to look at it in a completely different way to how we would normally look at it. Like, we're bringing in measures that have already kicked in terms of additional welfare payments that started to go out in the last week or so, bringing in a whole range of measures that happen within the same year. Normally your budget just starts in the following January, and then of course for businesses still having to design new schemes. And I think we all probably thought that, having come through COVID, that those exceptional schemes were not going to be needed anymore, but they have been, and they are. And again, the public service and many of our organisations, they are stepping up to the mark, and they are delivering in a way that I think would have been unthinkable just a very short time ago. So just that resilience, that ability to just drive through whatever challenges you're facing, we're going to have to retain that strength into the future, because I don't think these challenges are going to go away anytime soon.
And if the challenges aren't going away, Anne, and the Minister talked there about the need for perseverance but versatility, we do have to think about how we retain our people and how we recruit them. We have to do that differently if we're going to build the skills, the talent that we need for everything that we're talking about here today, innovation and transformation, if we're going to rise to meet these moments. Do you think we have to do a rethink there, a little bit of a reset?
I think there's kind of, maybe if I kind of break down your question into two parts, I think first We just recently in Microsoft published the Work Trend Index. So that's where we have surveyed over 20,000 employees globally, both from the public and private sector. And actually one of the key themes that came out was quite interesting, which is the concept of having to re-recruit our employees. And it was broken down into two parts. The first is the cohort that will have joined us during COVID, and what they're looking for is a real sense of community and connection. So I want to feel connected to the department I'm with or the organisation I'm with, and therefore the reason for coming into the office is around community and connection as opposed to kind of organisational needs. So I think that's a cohort that we really need to work on with. The second, which was really interesting, is the cohort of our employees that are kind of greater than 5 years. And actually what the survey showed was that that group of employees know their worth. And actually we often hear people leave because of, an increase in salary. Actually, that's often an output. The biggest part that came through in the research was around learning and development. So that cohort of employees want to have the time and the space to grow their own skills. And it might not be, if they're in finance, that they want to do it in finance. They want the space to be able to do it in maybe another area. They might want to go into HR or sustainability or whatever the case may be. So I think we really have to reflect and think about how we put learning and development at the core of what our employees want. The second part on skilling, 90% of all roles by 2030 will have will require digital skills. And in Ireland today, 47% of our population don't have digital skills. So that's an incredibly powerful statistic. I think, what we're doing, I think we need to look at both parts. We need to look at education and how we're embedding that into our curriculum. And in Microsoft, some of you may be aware, we have a great program called Dream Space. And over the last few years, we've nearly put 100,000 students through Dream Space, which is really exposing them to STEM, coding, and our plan, which we announced in the last 2 weeks, is to put 1 million students across the island of Ireland through it. So we need to make sure that we're embedding digital and the right programs in the core of our educational system, so we're building skills for the future. And the second part is, during COVID, in conjunction with FIT, one of our partners, we did Step Into Tech. So we took 10,000 people that were either, some of them had lost their roles, or others were in more traditional industries that wanted to learn digital skills. And 10,000 people reskilled. They did cloud accreditations. We have some great examples. One an electrician, another guy, bus driver in Sligo, now have entered into the tech sector. So if we keep looking at the tech sector and everybody here that has digital skills and upskilling ourselves, it won't be enough to meet that stat for 2030. We have to look at our young people coming through, and we have to look at how do we upskill people in more traditional industries.
Minister, I imagine as the Minister for Public Expenditure, you want everyone in the room to be prudent with taxpayers' money. How do people, though, go about balancing, if we're talking about innovation and transformation, that does require risk-taking and placing smart bets, and sometimes having to fail, but hopefully failing cheaply and quickly. What would you say to people who sometimes grapple a little with striking that balance?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. And look, failure is part of life, and you try again. And I think we can learn from the culture in business in the private sector. Entrepreneurs will try, they might fail, they'll try better and fail better and try again and eventually succeed. Of course, in the public service, it is different because we have layers of accountability and we have, appearances before Public Accounts Committee, we have freedom of information and so on like that. And look, it's important that we spend public money wisely, and you would expect me as Public Spending Minister, of course, to always advocate that. But that said, we do have to take risks, and of course they can be calculated risks. But I want people to come up with new ideas, and I think that in the structure that we have, there is an openness and there is a welcome for people who have ideas about trying new things, because if we're not prepared to try new things or do things differently, we simply will not make the progress that we need to make to provide the services in a better way for our people. And we can be great enablers in the public service because we have the ability to pull all of the main actors together, and particularly in my own department, which is a central department in government where we have contact with essentially all parts of the public service. That's why I think we are the right home for innovation, and I would just ask people to come forward with their ideas. Please engage, they will find a listening ear, they will find a welcome, and they will find positive support there, because we have to be willing to try new things and constantly seek improvements.
Great call to action. Thank you for that, Minister. Given that, Anne, as you look from the private into public, do you think there are obvious areas that we could be thinking about today, that there is potential for quick wins, big bets, smart investments?
Yeah, I think, because back to maybe where we started at the beginning, there's been incredible work done. If we think about some of the stuff done in health during COVID and track and trace, we think education, like teachers were teaching in a different way, kids were consuming in a different way. I think, the way we're all working now in a hybrid manner. So I think it's building on the momentum of that. I think maybe some key areas of focus is probably around healthcare. We do have a healthcare challenges at the moment. So it's how do we harness the use of the leadership we spoke about, and what the Minister is saying about that creativity, that testing, learning, being curious, and using the technology that's there from the tech sector to drive that change. The second, I think there's going to be a great discussion on policing later on today, and using how do we use data to really drive innovation. I think that's quite critical. I think education, we've spoken about it, like how do we embed more technology into education, into the curriculum, so that we can drive change. Some great examples of what's happening in Northern Ireland and what they're doing around really embedding technology at the core and transforming. We've just been involved in a project where we're just really transforming how teachers teach using technology, because our kids want it. And I think the last is citizen services. I mean, our citizens are now willing to interact with government in a completely different way, online. I mean, we've just gone leaps and bounds during COVID. So we need to make sure that we keep driving that forward, we keep using the technology, faster adoption of cloud. It's all there, and it's how we all work and interact together to keep the momentum going.
Great, love it.
Perseverance.
Perseverance, momentum, versatility. Thank you so much to the Minister, Michael McGrath, Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, and to Anne Sheehan, General Manager of Microsoft. Please give them a warm round of applause. Thank you. Thank you both. Now, reminder on Slido, do get your questions coming in there. We're going to go into now a three-way conversation. We will have microphones along the side when we're coming to the end of the conversation. Reminder, we would love your posts up on social, particularly as you hear from all of our experts who are making their way on stage now. So for this next session, we're going to talk a lot about design and delivery, particularly from a user-centric, from a public-first point of view, with a real focus on how do you do design while ensuring impact, with always the citizen at its centre. And we're also going to, in this conversation, consider a lot of the pressing challenges ahead for the public service, and how that user-led design can support public service to meet these challenges, some of which the Minister and Anne just talked about just now, if we are going to lead transformative public services. So you're all very welcome. I'll start from furthest away. We have Deirdre Mortell. Deirdre is the Chief Executive Officer of ReThink Ireland. We have Anne Doherty, probably familiar to all Corkonians in the audience, and Anne is the Chief Executive of Cork City Council, and we have David Moloney, who's the Secretary General of the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. Thank you all for joining us. David, maybe I'll come to you first, and I'm going to start with an obvious question, given that we've probably mentioned innovation transformation a dozen times already this morning. Why does it matter? And in grounding it in the why, what drives you every day when you sign up to build and be a part of a transformative, ever-changing, ever-evolving public service?
Thanks very much, Áine, and good morning, everybody. I think it's a great question. When I think about innovation, I suppose I sort of go back to one of the foundational pieces to me is the Green Paper on pensions in the early 2000s. And what it just says, very simply, is that in the future, whereas we had 5 working people to 1 pensioner in the past, in the future we'll have 2 working people to 1 pensioner. Well, how does that work? That can't work in an as-is way of approaching things. That has to work through those 2 people somehow managing to engage. Now, growing population is, in fact, short-term challenge, but long-term will help us with this challenge. But we can't, as-is isn't an option, therefore innovation is required. The kind of services we deliver, how we deliver them, to whom we deliver them, All of that has to change. And I suppose I go back sometimes again, I'm plagued with an economics background. And in the early 2000s, the OECD looked at Irish economic policy and said, well, this is all about, producer driven. This isn't customer focused. And kind of when I look at public service generally, there's a danger that we do what we do because that's the skill set we have and that's the organizational structure we have and that's what it produces. But of course, that's not the future. That's not where we need to end up. And I think a lot of what COVID has taught us is how important, because we couldn't actually have landed all the things we did in COVID, all the things the Minister and Anne spoke about earlier. Couldn't have landed any of that if we hadn't listened and communicated with people and what people were prepared to accept and got people to work with us. And I suppose, that's continues to be the challenge. And yet, it's an even greater challenge as we return to our kind of more normal reactions to things, maybe. There's a bit of a danger to that. It's a greater challenge in a more normal atmosphere, if we ever get to a fully normal atmosphere, and hopefully we will again. But that kind of sense of momentum that we spoke about in the earlier session, that sense of making things permanent, making this approach to change permanent, it's still not a choice. It wasn't a choice towards COVID, but when we look at our economic and social and climate goals, it's not a choice now either.
And everybody here has to constantly think about the world of 2030, 2040 and beyond, particularly when it comes to our population trends. What is the end that you often think about and then have to work backwards from when it comes to innovation and transformation? Like what is the goal? What's the big overarching driver that you wake up to every day? That's for you.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the most beautiful place in Cork, our City Hall. I have to get that in. But I suppose maybe just sitting in this very inspirational space, just think about the people who developed it and the vision that they had and what they were striving to do. So what I wake up every morning, and we as a team wake up every morning, is thinking about the future of the city. So our Cork is set to be the fastest growing city in Ireland. We've an objective to grow our population by 110,000 people by 2040. So that requires a completely different way of thinking about how do we develop the city, how do we deliver our services, what's important. So we start off first by having a plan, and I think that's really important. So we have our city development plan. It's a 6-year plan that sets out how we're going to use our land, where we're going to put our educational facilities, our health facilities, where people will work, how they'll get about. So that's, I think, a really important one. But what was important about our plan was that it was created with our citizens, so involving people in developing that plan so that at least it's connected. And then I suppose the other very important thing, it has to be nimble. Like all plans have to be nimble enough to change. That's what COVID taught us. We knew it before COVID, but actually we really found it out in COVID. So I think it is a bit like the people who built this fabulous space here. It's about thinking ahead and thinking about what we need to do and recognising that the way we did it in the past is not the way of the future. So that's where the innovative opportunities come in. I think public servants, each of us in this room, have always been innovative. We probably didn't call it that. Some people were called weird, some people were called dangerous because they took risks in the past. But actually it's great now we're having that conversation together about it's okay to be different, it's okay to try new things, and doing that for our population. That's why we all get up in the morning.
Great, well said. Deirdre, anyone who's familiar with ReThink Ireland, check them out, an amazing organisation. And Deirdre, what you and the team are thinking a lot about is this radical equality agenda. And given that we have these rising populations, and therefore at the moment we all recognise there are inequalities, there are parts of the system, of course, that are broken and we all know need fixing. How do you balance that? Yes, there's a futuristic, we have to prepare for increased populations, yet recognising there's parts of it already broken with the current population sizes.
So good morning, everybody, and lovely to be here in my hometown of Cork. And I had the pleasure of spending the weekend with my family, so thank you for holding this in Cork. And I'm having a rush of memories because the last time I was here was for the Cowpunchers Ball in my UCC days, and I never got up on the stage then, so this is a real pleasure. So we don't see any conflict between those two supposedly conflictual approaches. So yes, we do have lots and lots of equality issues in Ireland, some of them very long-term, educational disadvantage, housing, racism, lots of other things. And then we have some newer issues, obviously layering in on top of that, the climate crisis, the recent pandemic, which we think is over, but we're never very sure if it is or it isn't. And then we're looking at a probably 1% increase in our population in the last 10 months alone, in terms of both Ukrainian refugees and our more traditional international protection applicants. And that's a massive challenge for the government, for public services, and for the country as a whole. But if we get equality right for one, we get it right for all, and that's what the radical equality agenda is all about. And I think we have to look at, even in the last 10 months, in terms of how public services and communities have responded to this massive increase. I don't think anybody last December thought we were going to have a 1% increase in our population in 10 months, right? So it's not like we could ever be prepared for this. But what's happened? Like, the country and communities have risen to that in remarkable ways, and I think we need to look at what can we learn, right? So we've discovered that we can have a one-stop shop for migrants when they come in. We've discovered that we do have school places that we thought we didn't have. We've discovered that we do have places to house people that we thought we didn't have. So again, when we face into a situation where it's a wall and we have to climb the wall or die, we find ways. So the barriers to innovation fall away. And I think that's been found both at community level and at public and civil service level. And we found that also in the pandemic. I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But that's a radical equality agenda in action. We just don't like to call it that. Yeah. So let's celebrate what we've done, but let's really look at that and say, what else can we learn? How can we do this again and again when we need to?
David, we've heard there about the scale of the challenge, given those population trends, into which then we have to insert this principle of user-centred design, designing from the outside in with the public, the citizen in mind. But there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of challenges with that, because as leaders, you then have to piece through what's desirable, what's viable, what's feasible. How do you approach all of those sometimes competing voices to kind of go, this is the thing, this is the solution, here is how we solve that problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think Deirdre makes a very good point about the one-stop shop, for example. I mean, we tend to deliver things from our different silos instead of looking at the user needs and collecting around those and bringing the relevant people together. So in Dublin Airport, we brought together the relevant state agencies and departments. We were able to welcome in an unprecedented number of people from Ukraine and sort them out. Of course, that did then run up against, supply constraints, particularly around accommodation. And in terms of what was available in particular places, wasn't available in other places. So that piece around how you fit an integrated service offering centered around the people you're serving with your capacity and your capacity to deliver is always going to be a challenge. But I think it's a bit about our long-term planning. So when we think about long-term planning, we use data in a much more intensive way than we ever did before. We link data. The CSO, based here in Cork, everybody else got a local reference in, so I would as well. The CSO has developed a national data infrastructure, which is terrific. We are starting to link together in the short and long term. We're starting to pull together planning frameworks for climate and other strategies. And it's really as we develop and populate a long-term view based on the data and evidence, we then begin to get a sense of our own capacity and a sense of what will be needed into the future. Of course, we don't have a crystal ball, and certainly the population growth over the last very short period of time presents huge challenges for us all and huge challenges for public services. But again, I think, we have responded to those challenges in a way that's kind of informed by an interagency, evidence-based approach, kind of a get-it-done approach. And I think, that does speak to a changed risk appetite, amongst other things. And I think that's been a really important part of getting what we've done delivered. I think we need to build on that, build on the evidence, maintain a risk appetite. I was once asked what I thought the ideal risk appetite for the civil and public service was. I said somewhere north of 0 would be good. And at that stage, we didn't really have a risk appetite somewhere north of zero. I think more recently we do. I don't think it's just about COVID. I think before COVID, as Anne said, there were lots of innovators. They maybe didn't get the organisational support in all cases that they might have, but right across the civil and public service, there were innovators and innovations. We've built up the data infrastructure, we've built up an ICT infrastructure. It's part of what enabled us to move forward so rapidly and so well in the pandemic. And I think the organisational support for that increased risk appetite will be really important going forward.
Great, thank you. And I think your risk appetite is definitely well north of zero. Can you talk a little bit about the people-centric approach here at Cork City Council, some of the learnings around mini consultations, experimentations, particularly when you look around Cork City and see just how successful the pedestrianisation of so many streets has been?
Yeah, no, and it has been really interesting. Like, it is something that everybody wanted for so long, and I suppose we always found barriers. Irish people can't eat outside, Irish people won't want to be outside, you couldn't sit outside. But it's interesting, I suppose, the risk appetite was aided by the fact that everybody had one ambition. That was, how do we get out and about? How can we sustain business? How can we recreate together? So I suppose what was important for us, and we started talking about recovery, and I know we're still recovering from COVID, but we started talking about it really early. So we started engaging at a street-by-street level with the people who work in the street, the people who had business, the people who live there, about what will work for your street. And I think that's really important. We're not homogeneous. It's very, very heterogeneous, everything we do in the public service. So therefore, you have to look at it at its probably its smallest unit in order to make it work. So what worked for one street didn't work for another. But I suppose there was that burning platform, excuse the cliche, around people's just really wanting to get back to some form of normality. So therefore there was, I suppose, an acceptance of things mightn't be perfect. We were able to get in cycle lanes that would never have got in before. But what we did do was we did consult, and we got criticised, why aren't you moving? Dunleary, you're doing it faster. And we said, no, we want to engage with people. But actually our engagement at that time, when there was huge pressure, like just do it, actually meant that it's been implemented on a permanent basis, so we didn't have to start going backwards. So like that involving with people, but also recognising that each piece is a little bit different, I think was really important for us. And for our own staff as well, it was a great opportunity for people to say, I have an idea, could we look at it doing it differently? People maybe who weren't involved before and things. And that's one of the things, I suppose, that COVID did bring us, is that getting every voice into the space.
Yeah. Deirdre, for everything that Anne has just talked about, and David, that risk appetite, going out, learning from the public, creating that feedback loop, do you think it does require new leadership styles, different mindset shifts? Do we have to rethink how we as leaders approach that outside in, design from the outside in, I guess, as an approach that we consistently do?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it absolutely requires that, and I think it really requires a new generation of leadership, actually, and I think we really have to, we all have to relearn how we lead to some extent. Those of us who are a bit older, which is many of us in the room, but I think we also have to look at the young people on our teams and to recruiting people on our teams. If I'm thinking about what's the next generation of leadership that's going to be able to lead and support this innovation, we're going to have to innovate at much higher levels than we ever have before. So, collaboration is going to be the new competition. We can't innovate without collaboration, it just doesn't happen. So collaboration is the new competition, and we have to support our young people to learn those innovation skills. They'll bring many of them in. We hire a lot of young people who have experience of Enactus in college. They've worked in cross-disciplinary teams to solve problems, many of them social and environmental issues, but not all. They've competed as teams, but they've collaborated within teams. Ireland has won the Global Enactus Challenge. We have amazing young people who know how to do this stuff already. But how can we enable them once they get in? So we have to give them their heads. So there's a piece about strengthening our mentoring. There's strengthening about giving them the chance to lead and fail, permission to fail earlier, younger, space to fail, because that's part of what we have to learn, and that's also about cultures. So there's a bit about people like me and people like us stepping out of the way and supporting and managing in a totally different way. Just to give you an example, I spent last weekend in Cork as well at a fantastic Cork BIC and Broadlake event called the Entrepreneur Experience. Some of you might have heard of it, where 24 emerging entrepreneurs were mentored by 24 seasoned entrepreneurs over 24 hours. And I was a seasoned entrepreneur. One of the other seasoned entrepreneurs was a man called Áine Kerr, who's 22. He has founded a company called Evervault. He has raised $20 million from one of the best known VCs in California. He started by winning the young scientists at the age of 17 and has set up a company on the back of his innovation. I mentored alongside Áine last weekend, and he could hold his own with me. I'm old enough to be his mother. That was a real learning experience for me. It was a little bit scary, and I didn't feel that comfortable with it, but that's what we have to get used to, and I'm sure Áine is an exception, you know, or maybe I'm not an exception, I don't know. But like, you know, how can we make sure that we get the Áines of this world into the private sector, but also into the public and local authority sectors? We need those young people everywhere. But they won't stay if we're not giving them that shot. So absolutely, new generation of leadership is critical, and they're there and they want it. So it's up to us.
I think that pipeline, we obviously talked about it with Anne earlier, but it's going to come up throughout the day of how do you nurture a pipeline for the public service. We've talked about culture, we've talked about risk appetite. If we're going to talk today about new technologies, David, and we'll bandy around words like machine learning and artificial intelligence, all of that is only as good as the data that underpins it. Clean, quality, consistent data so you can do good modelling, good forecasting. Is there just more to be done in the public service, and is it going to require much deeper cross-collaboration between government departments?
Thanks very much, Áine. I think I'd just like to add in purposeful work to what you said there, Deirdre, just purposeful work, because I think in the civil and public service, that is a core part of our offering, and it's a core part of why we are all so committed to what we do. But you're absolutely right, Áine, about the data. As I said before, the national data infrastructure, data linking, particularly between revenue and social welfare. Over COVID, the creation of a data pool, a data lake in the health services that was so helpful in identifying the local spread of the disease and getting people information that was specific to them. All of that was hugely powerful. But I think we have to do more. There's about 1.7 million people on MyGov ID, but we don't, I think, push enough government and public services through mygov.ie. I think it's a wonderful platform with digital postbox. We have created an infrastructure. I think some part of the challenge now is how we use that infrastructure as well. And that's where kind of innovative ideas about how we push traffic towards that, I think, and start to use it more and more becomes very valuable, because I think at the end of the day, it's the lived experience of using it, finding it useful, having a purpose for it, that really underlines its value and convinces people, both in terms of people like me who think about how much is all this going to cost, and the people we serve who think, well, how am I getting value for this? How is it improving the public services on offer to me? So I think that's in a way the next challenge we have. I think it's a good challenge, and I think it reflects how far we've come in developing the data and the ICT infrastructure to a point where now we're saying, okay, now we really have to push out public services in this way. And of course, that's not just pushing out the same public services, that's also maybe reimagining how we deliver services in a digital environment, in a fully digitalized environment. And I think that's the next phase of challenge. And I think that's what innovation networks like the one that's created around here, that I know so many people are enthused about, are really important. And I think, you know, it's terrible to get to the age where you all won't think about young people as being a bit worrying, but they are. You know, we're really lucky. We are still getting, in a really tight labour market, we are still getting year on year really brilliant people into the civil and public service. And I think that really does reflect both the kind of society we are, where public services and quality of life for all and community is really valued. And I think it also reflects the type of purposeful work that we offer.
Thank you for that. and a theme we will come back to in other sessions again today. And you'll have heard the Minister earlier talk about finding that balance between, yes, you have to practice prudence, there's the taxpayers' money, but we have to find opportunities, the calculated risks, the smart bets, and if you're going to fail, well, hopefully fail cheaply for the Minister. Have you had moments, like you've had a radical transformative agenda for the city? Has there been learnings? Do you have a favourite mistake, a favourite insight that you've had that has meant, it actually has made us better and stronger, but we had to make that mistake in the first instance?
Probably a long list, which is good, because if we don't make mistakes, well, I think we're stale and we're not actually doing what we should be doing, which is actually looking to improve our services. I suppose maybe a learning, and can you call it a mistake? So during COVID, we had obviously looked at how do we make our city greener, more pleasant. We introduced artwork, we did a lot of planting additional trees, but obviously it takes a long time for the real trees to grow. So one of the innovation technologies we looked at were moss walls, which is a German technology, which is geared to looking at, can you look at technology and the living nature of moss walls to actually absorb impurities from the air, etc. So we invested with our partners in the NTA, who were very good to support this, and there was a lot of delay in getting them here. So they're seating, they're in the city centre. Visitor attraction, please go and have a look while you're here. And so we installed them across the city centre. There's seating, there's air quality monitoring, monitors on them, and there's also information. Well, did it cause a stir? It did, because we were, in terms of risk, we were told, obviously, that we broke the bank of the public purse. Sorry, David, and Minister. Why didn't we plant thousands of real trees instead? So. And then it became very political, and that's very difficult for local politicians. But I suppose if we really are serious about change and we're really serious about innovation, we have to take those risks, and some of them will work and some won't. I suppose the positive outcomes is there's some great new seating in the city centre. We do have air quality monitoring going on. It also, I suppose, our air quality strategy, which I'm not sure would have got any traction. Boy, did it get a load of traction. We now have a citizens project where there's 1,000 air quality monitors across the city. So there was a very good outcome from it, but I suppose for people involved, for staff, and I suppose one of the things, we're not kind to each other. Lots of people stand back and fold their arms and say, sure, I knew that was going to happen. We all experience that. So I think that we do need to be kind to each other. And in leadership roles, there are some colleague leaders in the city did text and say, you know what, fair dues to you, you're trying something different. So I think the learning is, don't be dissuaded just because something goes wrong. Of course, you have to be mindful of the public purse. We have to pursue value for money. But sometimes you can't sign all that up in the beginning. That's just part of the innovative journey. And embracing technology, as we've all said, is part of the future. So look, it's just a little example of, we got a very negative impact from the citizen. And interestingly, Claire, who's our head of comms, I recently sent her an article where a city in the UK introduced the same technology and they were lauded. Yeah. So it's just...
Your day will come, Anne.
Yeah, no. And it's not about being lauded, but it's just interesting, isn't it? And it's about timing, and it's about how people feel about spending public money on innovation when there are so many crises. So I suppose there's a little bit about, as one of our colleagues who retired, as Claire reminded me earlier, said, keep calm and focus on the strategy, which is about how to improve the quality of life.
Radical focus, don't get distracted. Yeah, it's a good mantra. I'd love to come to audience questions in a moment, so just while I ask Deirdre a question, get your hand up and we'll find a microphone, and keeping an eye on Slido as well. Deirdre, to go back to your earlier point, the Shane Kearns of the world, the pipeline, and David saying, it is about purposeful, purpose-driven work, and you can see that in everything that public sector departments do. You think a lot about the idea of social innovation and social innovators. Do you think they exist in the public sector as you look in today? And if they do exist, are we harnessing them in the right ways?
So they absolutely do exist, and I think we all know that in the room, and probably lots of them are here. They've chosen to be here, you're probably part of that group. So, I mean, and maybe just to explain a little bit why I say that. So what ReThink Ireland does, because many of you probably won't have heard of us, we bring together philanthropy and government funds to solve the critical social and environmental issues of our time. And we were created by government to do that, so we're independent of government. And what we do is we find and back the best social innovations developed by nonprofits who do that. And we back them with a venture capital-like approach. So we provide both grants and capacity building business supports to help them grow. And so going back to we bring together the philanthropy and government funding. So our government funding often comes from dormant accounts funds, but it also often comes from government departments or other state agencies who are identifying a policy challenge that looks like a social or environmental challenge, and they're struggling to implement it, often because what's needed is innovations that might have been already developed at community level, but aren't right, haven't grown, they don't know about them. So we've actually been, so the reason why I know there are innovators is because we've been approached by a number of different, for example, government departments, including the Department of Children, also Rural and Community Development, to manage innovation funds for them. And because they say, look, you know, we know how to do straight down the line grant making, but what's needed in innovation is a little bit different, and that's what we actually specialize in. So it's not just about the money, we do performance-based grant making, it's hitting milestones, and we also provide accelerators that we run because we know that what it takes to develop a service isn't the same as what it takes to grow it. So I know that there are little bundles of innovators spread around government departments and other parts of the public service who are always saying, here's our challenge, we can't do it the usual, we can't meet it the usual way, and maybe we need to go outside to help us think about that, and we find them, they find us, they trip over us, and we partner to help them do that. An example would be during COVID, obviously there were lots of COVID interventions. The Stability Fund for the voluntary sector was done by the Department of Rural and Community Development, and the DRCD officials very smartly said, let's put 10% of this into innovation, because there's things that have been developed on the ground that we need to keep for the future, not just lose again. And they asked us to manage that fund. They put 5 million in. We were able to bring another 500,000 through philanthropy. So that's 5.5 million that did amazing things. A simple example, if I have enough time. We all know that children experiencing disadvantage at home when schools were shut down couldn't access online schooling. So we had an accelerator around educational disadvantage running with 10 different initiatives. 2 of them had never met. They came together on our accelerator. Each of them had half of the solution. One half was an access program who had access to 30 schools in Leinster, 30 DEIS schools in Leinster, including a large number of DEIS Band 2. Those kids did not have the internet and they didn't have screens. And the other was a recycling centre for computers, iPads, and generally all that stuff. So they could take in donated computers and screens, strip them out, add educational software, add cybersecurity, and distribute them to schools. So one had the computers and the other had the network. They came together and distributed tens of thousands of computers to DEIS schools who got them out where they needed to go. Some of you might have seen the Late Late Show appeal that came out of that. That started on our accelerator, but that's the point about collaboration. Neither of them had the answer. Both of them were awake at 4 o'clock in the morning worrying about those kids who had no school. But through that collaboration, we helped them to raise some money. They got on the Late Late Show all by themselves, and look what happened. So that's just a simple example.
Great, thank you. Tangible examples. I did say we would take audience questions. If anyone had their hand up, I'll go to you quickly. Otherwise, you will catch all of them at coffee break in a few minutes. Just before then, I don't say a hand up, but we will be looking for your audience questions, and I will be keeping an eye to Slido. Just 30 seconds each. I said everybody the challenge at 10 o'clock of just one thing. Is there a mantra? Is there an insight? Is there wise words, a call to action, anything you want to leave people with? David, 30 seconds.
I have to do the value for money thing. Doing the same thing the same way you always did it is not value for money. Therefore, you know, innovate, do things differently. But also we have to support you in doing that.
Great, thank you. Anne?
I think sometimes where you least expect is where you'll actually find that little nugget. So give everybody the space. I believe in life you should always appoint people who are better than you, because they'll keep you on your toes, number one, but they'll also bring forward those absolutely amazing ideas. So it's just never be afraid to look in any corner for the ideas.
Great, thank you. And Deirdre?
Being an innovator can be very lonely. Find your thought partner. They might be in your team, they might be somewhere else, they might be in this room today, they might be in ReThink Ireland, they might be somewhere else, but you can only innovate through collaboration, and they might not be your actual collaboration partner, but they'll help you get out of your head, and then you're moving from thought to action. So just find that one person.
Great advice. Thank you so much. David Moloney, Secretary-General of the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, Anne Doherty, Chief Executive, Cork City Council, and Deirdre Mortell, Chief Executive Officer, ReThink Ireland. Please give them a lovely warm round of applause.